Well, timer now is 7:43, and Arizona is one of the fastest growing and hottest states. People are paying a lot to live here. In fact, some are calling the situation a housing crisis. According to the real estate website Redfin, the median sale price for a Phoenix home rose from $325,000 in January 2021 to $404,000 by October 2021. That is a 24% increase. And we've heard the stories that rent has also skyrocketed. So is this trend here to stay, and what's the solution? And joining us this morning is ASU professor Rashad Shabazz, who recently sat on a panel put on by ASU's Project Humanities to discuss the housing crisis. You know, we've been reporting on these stories of people being priced out of their homes, also being forced to look for another place to live just to rent because the landlords are just raising so much. So what's the crisis look like here in the Valley?
It's as bad as anywhere in the nation. Arizona is dealing with an unprecedented housing crisis, and we see rising rents, we see rising cost of housing, and until we have some real serious state and federal legislation to help people who are being evicted, to help people stay in their homes, to help people afford rent, to place some caps on the fantastic growth of the market here, we're going to continue to have this crisis.
Yeah, and when we hear about some of these stories of people who've been living in places for years, or people who are already on rental assistance being told by their landlords they're not going to accept Section 8 vouchers anymore, it's heartbreaking. Is this a humanitarian crisis here?
Yeah, it absolutely is, but it also says something about the nature of the housing market. The fact that we have a housing market that is all private, meaning that there are no places in the housing market where the whims of the market do not determine the value of what it costs to live somewhere. And the fact that we have that across the board, and that we don't have much in terms of subsidies or real support to help people stay in their homes, we're going to have this kind of crisis.
So what are some of the solutions that need to be explored to solve this problem?
Well, I think part of one of the solutions is understanding the poison pill that was put into the housing market in the beginning. You know, from the early beginning, the housing market was segregated along race lines, right? White Americans were able to get 98% of all of the housing subsidies and lending, and people of color were kept out. And what that did is it created developed and undeveloped areas. So in Phoenix, for example, north of Washington Avenue, white Americans were given access to home loans. They were allowed to move into that neighborhood. South of Washington Avenue, black and other people of color were forced to live there. And as a result of that, it created an underdeveloped, uneven housing network where there were subsidies and support given north, and there was a denial of subsidies and support given south. And what that's done is it's allowed for the market to then begin to move to these places that were underdeveloped, where the land is cheaper, where the housing is cheaper, and developers can purchase land there for $1 and sell it for $7. And that kind of underdevelopment, uneven development, it wreaks havoc on our housing market. So that sort of racist poison pill that was put in from the beginning helped to put us in the position that we're in right now.
So right now, when we're talking about how to solve some of these problems, what can be done, and how long would it take to correct this, this housing crisis?
One of the things that we can do is we can create a form of reparation for those who have been kept out of the housing market. Black, Latinx, Indigenous, other people of color who were systematically kept out, we can provide subsidies for them. Right now in Evanston, Illinois, they're putting together a project to do precisely that, where they've taken a pocket of money, about $20 million, and they're using that money to provide the 3% down payment for housing and subsidies for the housing market over time. That's something that we can do in states and municipalities and across the entire nation. We can also provide better support for people who are renters, and we can also try to begin to create a marketplace for housing that is not determined by the private sector.
All right, Professor Shabazz there. Thank you so much for joining us today.